Hey guys, it's Brett. Thanks for dropping by my channel. So I wanted to do a quick July wrap up, half of which I've already done 2 episodes ago. But I will quickly recap those books without going into them, what I had already covered. So if you're seeing this without that, and something I talk about quickly or show you, you can go back to my video 2 ago where I talked about those. Does that make sense? Hopefully. Okay, that's all. Let's go. All right, so quickly wrapping up the books that I had already talked about that I read this month. Speech Team by Tim Murphy, really liked. Yellow Face by R.F. Kuang, really liked. Deep Sky by Yumi Katase, really liked. Congratulations, The Best Is Over by R. Eric Thompson. Actually, I think I was reading this at the time when I did the last one, and I ended up really enjoying this. His series of essays, it's interesting because he will be on in a few weeks on the Gays Reading podcast, and he is a huge super fan of Ann Patchett. And I said to him, it's interesting because this particular book of essays reminded me of a way of Ann Patchett in that, they're heartfelt, all of those things, but he kind of rounds out with a very kind of moving story about his father-in-law, which felt very Patchett-esque to me. So anyway, but it's if you like R. Eric Thomas, I liked this more than Here for It. So it's worth getting, and I imagine it would be a fun listen to since he reads it. The Look Back Window, which I talked about, really loved this. He will be on the Gays Reading podcast next week. Fantastic, great interview. And then Brian Dearborn's Whisper, which is a totally summer fun thriller a la the movie Scream. And if you like that movie and those kind of things, you will love this. Okay, so for the remainders, I have 5 other titles to go through with you. 3 of them nonfiction, and for me, the nonfiction books were like the big winners this month for me. But I'm going to start with the fiction ones. The first was Chilean Poet by Alejandro Zambra. Never had read him before, never would have even been aware of this. Translated by Megan McDowell. It's a fantastic translation. It's a great, really funny, interesting book. This was my Real Life Book Club's pick this month that one of our members picked. And it follows this young man who wants to be a poet, kind of him growing up in Chile, and kind of what happens. It's really funny. It's very smart. It reminded me at times there was something almost John Irving-esque about it, some of the absurdity of it. And then as he becomes an adult, his girlfriend's son, who he adopts, he does. Not kind of, he does. Let's be definitive. But it's all about the kind of poetry scene in Chile, which I did not realize is a huge thing. But really good book, really interesting. So yeah, I would recommend. Okay, so the other fiction book I read is coming out in October, which is Mona Awad's Rouge. I had never read any Mona Awad before. I did not read Bunny, and last year or the year before is All's Well, either one. Now I somewhere I have in my piles All's Well, and I'm certainly going to go back and read it because I thought this was so interesting. It's a little bit like a really effed up fairy tale kind of lens through the filter of Eyes Wide Shut, about a woman who is living in Montreal, who goes out to California because her mother apparently has fallen to her death off a cliffside. But the kind of central focus of the book is the attachment or obsession that people have with beauty and youth. It's really interesting. And it was one of these things I'm reading the beginning and going along with it and like, this is cool, okay. And then suddenly something happened about midway through and I was like, what is going on? And it kind of kept me unsettled, and it's very much a kind of gothic modern day horror story that I had no idea where it was going. Every time I'd start to think like, okay, this is what this is going to be, it was not that. It's really fascinating. And as I've started to find out a little bit more about Mona Awad, I'm so curious as to her own personal story and her own feelings about not only her mother, her own lineage. The girl in the book is half Greek, and she kind of has a lot of her father's dark features, where her mother is pale and redhead and very almost alabaster skin, which is kind of, the idea of beauty. Anyway, it's really, 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 really interesting. I think you're going to hear more about this book as it gets closer and certainly when it comes out. So really interesting. Okay, so the 3 nonfiction books. The first is Greg Marshall's Leg, the Story of a Limb and the Boy Who Grew from it. Crazy. Greg grew up with a limp. He had gone to doctors. His parents took him to doctors about it. They continually stressed to him that it was nothing more than tight tendons and muscles, and he needed to stretch out. It wasn't until his father passed away and he was in his early 30s that he discovered that he actually had cerebral palsy, and his parents never told him about it. Now, before you're like, how could that happen? Trust me, it all makes sense. This family is outrageous in the best way. No family I'd want to grow up in necessarily. However, they are characters. His mother is battling cancer almost from the beginning of the book, and then his father gets diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease. So there's a lot going on. I say all this, but we'll add the caveat: it is hilarious. I know you would not think that's what I'm going to say about everything that I just preceded that line with. But he is so funny, Greg, and the way he tells the story, and there's no kind of feel sorry for me, my life is terrible, anything like that. It is all really positive, but it's really this boy kind of coming of age, dealing with the fact that he had, cerebral palsy, which he didn't even know about, and also that he was gay. It's really, really, really terrific. There's points of it that reminded me, because of just the outrageousness of some of these situations, a little bit of David Sedaris. It also reminded me of Augustin Burroughs. If you like either one of those, I think that you would really enjoy this story, his story. But really, really, really good. Okay. Coming from this thing of but truth is stranger than fiction, and trust me, this is so crazy, is The Sullivanians by Andrew Still. You guys. Okay, so from the late 1950s to roughly like 1991, in the middle of Manhattan on the Upper West Side, there was an organization called the Sullivanian Institute, okay? It was started by 2 people. The main guy, Saul, was not even a therapist. I mean, not licensed therapist, but they came up with a kind of a therapy to help people because they believed that the traditional family that everyone had been like kind of the white picket fence, mom and dad and 2 kids, and was what are screwing people up, and that the most successful way was to move away from that. So it began as a series of people getting involved and going through this therapy that kind of tried to separate you from your parents to really promote individuality. In the process, it became like a very kind of, I want to say almost like a commune of artists and intellectuals, Picasso and the singer Judy Collins and Richard Price, the writer, were just some of the people that got involved. But it also became a place where the traditional ideas about marriage were kind of shunned. People were expected and encouraged to have multiple sexual partners. And as they begin to cohabitate together, have children, it was encouraged and eventually kind of enforced that you wouldn't raise your child by yourself or with your partner, but everyone would raise your child. And in fact, there are multiple stories in here of mothers being separated from their kids almost immediately, lest the parents screw the children up. It's crazy. So it grew in popularity and size. They started a theater company. You guys, I can't even tell you. It's so compelling. First of all, it's exhaustively researched. My only problem with the book really is there are a lot of, for lack of a better way of putting it, cast of characters. And I found myself getting confused sometimes with like, okay, who's sleeping with who, who's partnered with who, because it's so damn incestuous. I really needed some kind of massive flowchart to give me all the connections and the offspring of each pairing, because it's vast. But it turns into a cult effectively, and I'm all about a cult story. So I just loved this, and I think this would be I would love to see this dramatized and turned into like a mini series for like Showtime or one of the cablers, or the streaming services, because it just reads like that. It's so crazy, but really compelling. If you're not always a nonfiction person and want to try something out, this is one of the nonfiction books to try. It's great. Lastly, I just finished this, The Many Lives of Mama Love by Laura Love Hardin. Again, incredible story. Laura Love Hardin started her life. She was like a soccer mom. She was divorced. She was in another relationship. She had a kid with her current husband. She had kids with her previous husband. She ends up with her current husband getting addicted, getting onto drugs, heroin, and kind of to support the habit, she does crazy stuff. One of which is when she gets to the schools in the morning, when she'd park, she'd find out like which women were inside, and if their cars were open, and she'd rifle through to find credit cards or if there was money in their cars. Insane. Eventually, they're both caught, both sent to prison. It's her story of redemption, basically, and how she comes back. She becomes an editor and also a book co-author, she becomes a best-selling New York Times co-author of a couple different books, including one which was an Oprah book pick. So she goes from being basically this jailhouse woman to sitting down with Oprah, turns her life around, and this is the story. It's fascinating and riveting and a page turner, and not gonna lie, shed more than a few tears at times, because you just root so hard for her. I would absolutely expect that this is going to be optioned and turned into a movie starring Renee Zellweger or someone like that. But it is really uplifting. It's a really quick read. I flew through this thing once I got started, but it's really, really, really good. So that's it. I will leave you. The one other book I just started, which I should just do this in July, but whatever. And I mean, in my August TBR, but which is Strange Sally Diamond by Liz Nugent. I was supposed to be in a discussion group for this that happened Sunday, and I just couldn't get to it. But I will say, holy crap, this is great. I'm listening to this on audio as well, which is really wonderful because it's Irish. I'm in such a tear right now of reading all these books, either set in Ireland and I'm loving all of them. This is about a woman I don't want to tell you too much. All I'm saying is Strange Sally Diamond is a woman who has some kind of something on the spectrum or something. It's very it's not specific when the book starts, but her father has died, who she lives with, and she has just put his body in the back in the burner to burn it, which is what he instructed her to do in the perchance he dies because he was ill, and that starts the book. It's really good. It's really good. So more when I finish this, but I'm going to fly through this. So, all right, guys, that is all. I hope you're all having a wonderful week. Really quickly, I just want to post up here for Gaze Reading. We have an amazing month of author interviews, August. And so this is the lineup right now for August. We're on all the podcast places. If any of you have gone and listened, I so appreciate it. And if you haven't and you want to take a gander, I would appreciate that. If you like what you're hearing, please rate us, like us with 5 stars. All of that helps the algorithm, whether you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. I really appreciate it. Thank you all for being here today, and I will see you all shortly.